My name is Angela and I'm a visually impaired designer. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm excited to talk to you about the design process and how important it is to consider your user and your audience throughout the whole process. I'll be sharing 5 of my top steps or ways that you can consider your user and your audience. Now, because everyone's different and no 2 users are the same, it can be a very complicated thing to make sure that you're hitting your target audience and that you really understand your users. I feel like it's pretty safe to say that the majority of us have felt excluded from a designer service because of a circumstance that we had no control over. Whether that's because of your age, your gender, your ethnicity, your height, your education level, there are so many circumstances that need to be considered when you're looking at your target audience. If you like this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and to subscribe to my channel below. Now let's get into the steps. The first step in the design process to consider is knowing exactly who your audience or users are. It's important to understand what problem you're trying to solve for them and how you'll get to the best solution for their needs and desires. If you're creating something without knowing who your target audience is, it's going to be very hard for them to connect to your design, and they're really not going to be as interested in what you're creating. And if your design doesn't create a solution to the problem that you're really trying to target, then what's the point of your design anyways? Let's say you're designing an invitation for a corporate event that's more formal. You wouldn't have silly little cartoons on it, and you probably wouldn't use a playful typeface or bright shiny colors. You'd probably go for a more elegant or sophisticated look. There are situations where it's not as clear who your user is, and there's a wider range of people who could be your potential users. Another example would be if you were creating the wayfinding system for a building, you would want to make sure that it works for people with disabilities, people of all gender ages. So if it's something that needs to be accessed, it should be accessed by people of all heights, including those who are in wheelchairs. You should consider people who have visual impairments trying to get around the building without being able to see. You would also want to make sure that your building layout works well for people of all cultures, and this really just depends on who your target audience is and who will be using this building. One wayfinding system is going to look way different than another based on who the target audience is. As a designer, it's your job to make sure that a design is effective for the people who will be using it. I mean, after all, what's the point of creating something if it's not effective? Now, this leads me to the second step in the design process. That's really getting to know your audience or your users. Some of the most effective ways to get to know your users is to get out there and get to know them. Do research on them, their history, figure out who they really are, what they care about, what they need. You can have interviews one-on-one with them. You can do focus groups where you bring people together and talk to them about their needs. You can find literature out there to really help you understand them and their situation. You can send out surveys to your audience. You can do usability testing. And one of my favorite ideas is to do a co-design where you actually design something with them. You can have like a session where you give them a situation where they can give you your ideas, and then you can really consider those in your ideation stage, and you can really get some good ideas out of really just designing something with them. You'd be surprised how well they actually know what their needs are, more than you would know personally. Because after all, it is being designed for them, so it would make sense to consider what their ideas are. One of the biggest mistakes you could make as a designer is guessing or assuming things about your users without actually talking to them and taking the time to do your research. This is when we run into problems because we think that we know who our user is. So guys, take it from me and save some time in your process and really make sure you do your research. It's really important to be extra thorough on this step to make sure that it's helping you understand the rest of the process, and in the long run, it really will save you a lot of time. Now, you'll continue doing research throughout the whole design process, but once you feel like you're in a good place and you're ready to move on to the next step, the third step to consider is putting yourself in your user's shoes. What better way is there to get to know your audience than to really try to put yourself in their shoes and understand what life is like for them and how your design would really affect them? There are a couple of methods that I'll mention that are used in the design community. The first one would be creating user personas. So once you really understand who your user is, you can create a couple of different personas depending on how many you feel like your design requires. And this will be just like a fictitious person who's based on someone who is one of your potential users. So you'll kind of create a character to help you kind of put yourself in the mindset of who your users really are. Now this could be one persona or it could be several, depending on the range of the users who will be using your design. Now if there's certain behaviors or things that your users tend to do, why not try to do those things so that you can try to relate? One example of this would be if you're creating an exhibition and you know that the likelihood of people who are in wheelchairs, then you would really want to consider how someone in a wheelchair would experience your exhibition design. I highly encourage you to actually go find a wheelchair and sit in it and go around and try to see if it works for you when you're in a wheelchair. Now this isn't saying that you'll totally understand what it's like to be in a wheelchair all the time. This is just a simple way for you to see if you physically can reach things or if you can get around the little lips on the ground, if the environment works well for someone in a wheelchair. Okay, make sure we understand. This does not mean you understand the emotional needs of someone in a wheelchair or other kind of situations that come with that. Because obviously we're not going to be able to understand fully what it's like to live in a wheelchair, but we can do our best to understand it a little bit and how it relates to the exhibition. Now another user that you might want to make sure you consider for an exhibition is someone who's older or elderly who might have vision problems, a hearing impairment, maybe it's not as easy for them to digest more complicated words and it needs to be explained more to them, or there's some type of technology that you're using, so maybe having instructions to help them step by step use your exhibition could be really helpful for someone who's elderly. I think the most important part of putting ourselves in someone else's shoes is to really make sure that we're not just thinking how we think the exhibition should be because of our personal biases, but we really take ourselves out of our biases and we see how other people view things. Another method you can use is to create a user journey map. Now this is when you would draw out the emotions of when they're doing it. You write out what they're going to be experiencing when throughout the process, and so then you can better understand what they're going through when they're using your design. So let's keep going with this example of an exhibition design. When your user comes to your exhibition, what are their feelings, their thoughts? What kind of barriers or struggles might they have when they enter your exhibition? And then when they're walking through your exhibition, what other type of emotions will they start having? And then just look at the whole experience of them being at your exhibition from beginning to end and consider those points so that you can really make sure that you're considering the needs of your users. Now the fourth step of the design process is when you're designing and you're actually creating things. This is the step that most people will probably think about the most, is when you're actually creating your designs. Now when you're creating things, it's rarely going to be the first design that you come up with. It's going to take a lot of iteration and testing and making sure that it works well and revision after revision after revision. When I was in design school, I had a brand teacher who made us design 300 different logos before we could really decide on one. Now the whole point of this assignment was to consider things that we didn't initially think of and push us to really put ourselves outside of what we thought initially was the right solution. And who knows, maybe you come up with some really dumb solutions, but then your best solutions come from those ideas. Some good ways to test your designs is to create a prototype, a mock-up, or even just show some users and get some feedback on it. Now the fifth and final step is follow up. So once your design is launched or you put it out there, how do your users respond to it? Were you able to create a solution that really hit the pain points that you were trying to design for? Is your user happy, or are there things that could be improved on the next time you create it? Are there adjustments that you can make to better your design? It's really important to follow up after putting something out there. It's not good practice in design to just throw a design out there and then never look at it again. I think we all know that we could continually look at a design and never feel like it's fully done. We can always improve things and make sure that it's working well. Now, if it's something simple like a flyer design or something, obviously this isn't going to be such a big deal. But you can also learn from your users so that next time you make a flyer or poster, you can better improve your designs and it will work for a wider range of people that time. I hope you found this video helpful, and next time you're designing something, even if it's as simple as having a family gathering and people are coming to a party, you can better think about considering who your user is and how you can really cater to their needs and desires. I look forward to seeing you next week in my next video, and I hope you all have a fantastic day. Bye!